Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Elliot Spitzer.
And I'm Kathleen Parker. Up first tonight, a strange and disturbing story. And it comes from the top ranks of the Navy. In an apparent attempt to raise morale on the aircraft carrier Enterprise, the ship's #2 officer instituted a sort of home movie night. What is in those videos is shocking: anti-gay slurs, simulated masturbation, and liberal use of a hateful word, faggot. Keep in mind, the commander in question, Captain Owen Honors, is now the top officer of that Navy fighting ship. We have some clips to share with you from the videos. Please be advised that they contain graphic language. Here's Captain Honors himself playing 3 different characters, introducing a greatest hits reel of video clips.
As usual, the Admiral and the Captain have no idea about the contents of the video or movie this evening, and they should not be held accountable in any judicial setting. Over the years, I've gotten several complaints about inappropriate material during these videos. Never to me personally, but gutlessly through other channels. This evening, all of you bleeding hearts, and you, fag swole boy, why don't you just go ahead and hug yourselves for the next 20 minutes or so, because there's a really good chance you're going to be offended tonight.
Now, these next scenes come from a video about water conservation. It depicts mock homosexual interactions between both men and women. A Navy statement on all of this says in part, quote, production of videos like the ones produced 4 to 5 years ago on USS Enterprise were not acceptable then and are not acceptable now, or still not acceptable in today's Navy. The Navy is investigating the incident.
Are the videos simply bad humor or deeply offensive innuendo? And should the captain keep his job? Joining us are Commander Kirk Lippold, who sat in a very similar position as commander of the USS Cole, a Navy warship attacked by al-Qaeda while stationed in Yemen, and Jeffrey Toobin, CNN senior legal analyst and the friend of the show. Jeffrey, hey, thanks for joining us, and Captain, you as well. Thank you for being with us.
Captain Lipold, I wanted to start with you. I've watched the video. What do you think should happen to him? Should he be punished, or is he best left in place? What would best serve the country?
I think right now the Navy is very, very careful and judicious in when they go to select who are going to be the executive officers who then fleet up to be the commanding officers of aircraft carriers. There are a handful of individuals that, quite frankly, are put in the unique position of taking battle groups and a warship like an aircraft carrier out to defend U.S. interests worldwide. They're not chosen lightly. He has 27 years of experience in the Navy, and quite frankly, he should not be judged on what is a one-time poor lack of judgment in doing this, and I don't think it's going to affect his overall career, and nor should it.
You know, Jeff, let me ask you, first, do you agree that he should keep his command, having seen this video? And second, if this same behavior were undertaken by the CEO of a major public company and the board of directors were looking at this video, what would the appropriate response by the board of directors be, and is that relevant in the context of the Navy?
I think it is relevant, and I think a CEO who did this would probably be fired, and I think that would be the likely result here, and I think it's important to say it's a tragedy because, you know, this Captain Honors, from all that we can tell, has served his country well and bravely for decades. He has this enormously important job, responsible for thousands of sailors on this single ship, but you know, let's not, you know, use fake words here. I mean, there is a lot of bigotry on that video. It is anti-gay, it is anti-woman, and it's not right. And I don't think someone like that should be commanding a ship. Whether they should lose their whole job in the Navy, I don't know. But certainly commanding an important ship, it seems wrong to me at this point.
Well, it does seem, I mean, it's very offensive. And it is, you know, there was a time when that would have been perfectly fine if it were still an all-boys club and everybody could have their little, you know, their sense of humor. But those times have changed, and there are women on that boat. And it was highly offensive, I think, to women, and certainly to gays who were perhaps at that time still living undercover, essentially.
And I would only add that it is not just offensive to women and gays, it is offensive to men and straight people as well. That this is not, acceptable behavior in the 21st century period.
So you don't think we're sort of imposing civilian values on a military environment? Perhaps this is a better question for you, Commander, because we have, we do have certain rules that are enforceable in the civilian world. Are we trying to? Are we imposing those values on people who are in a wartime scenario where they have to vent and just blow off steam, as the captain has claimed?
Well, quite frankly, when you look at imposing civilian values, I think it's the other way around. I think the civilians look at the military and say, not only should you represent our values, but they should be represented to the highest standards possible, and they should exceed civilian values and norms, quite frankly, because we are the standard bearers worldwide for how the United States and our military are perceived. So don't think you should look down on that. As a matter of fact, you should hold the military to a higher standard of performance and behavior and decorum.
Well, I'm happy to do that. But, Commander, I mean, this fellow showed such poor judgment. Does that not reflect on his broader judgment?
Well, I looked at the video in toto this afternoon and took the time to watch the entire thing. I mean, there is clearly foul language in it, but then again, if we were going to do about that, we would have been without a commander-in-chief in President Clinton and be without a vice president today. When you look at some of the actions that go on in the video, they are of poor quality. When the executive officer makes a statement that the commanding officer and the admiral that are aboard can't be held accountable for that doesn't fly. A captain is a captain, and he is responsible for what goes on his ship, period, dot, end of statement. The fact that he is fleeted up to that position, he should know that today. And the fact that the admiral was the senior officer embarked, I would find it difficult to believe that his staff did not become aware of this video, watch some of it, yet probably said nothing to him.
Well, Commander, that actually is the issue I want to pursue. When I watched the video and I saw those sort of false disclaimers, we're responsible, don't hold the captain, the admiral responsible, clearly others knew. This was broadcast to 6,000 sailors on this vessel. Word of this was everywhere. So is this now going to become sort of like a virus that spreads through to the higher ranks in the Navy as information about this is tracked to other people?
I don't believe so. I think what you have to look at it, and I believe the Navy's going to do a complete and thorough investigation, but I think you're going to find it is an isolated incident. If it does begin to expand and show that this behavior is normal, then clearly the Navy is going to have to reset and re-educate some of the value systems in their senior officers, and I believe that they have the capability of doing that.
Well, assuming he keeps his position, what would you recommend? I mean, what do you see as appropriate punishment or whatever the repercussions are?
What I think you're going to see is he'll probably get a senior officer counseling on this type of behavior and how he should never have put himself in that position. And I think they're going to judge his performance throughout his entire command tour to determine his suitability for a future in the Navy. I don't think we should relieve him off the cuff just to satisfy some social desire for political correctness. I think we have to look at the sum total of his performance on board throughout his executive officer tour and now his commanding officer tour before they make any snap decision. And the investigation should run its course as well.
I mean, I agree with everything the captain said except one thing. You know, this is not just political correctness. This is offensive conduct. If you are a woman on that ship, a woman sailor serving your country, and see the way women are treated, if you are a gay sailor who was in the closet, as you had to be during the era of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This is offensive conduct. So to dismiss it as just political correctness, I think that's unfair. I do think the captain is also right, though, that we have the right and the obligation to expect a higher standard for military officials.
I want to just add to that, Jeffrey.
Than lower standards.
Because it's not just offensive, it's hostile. I mean, that's a hostile environment. If you're a woman and you see some of the things, I mean, we didn't show nearly what was in that film. There's some much worse scenes, more offensive, but that's hostile. You don't feel safe in that environment.
There's one point that I'd like to bring out as well. Although it's only been briefly discussed in the media, one of the issues is that several people raised questions regarding the appropriateness of this video and supposedly were brushed off. I think that the Navy owes it to go back and take a real hard look at were there legitimate issues raised by the crew on that video and were they dismissed out of hand, or were they in fact investigated and they find that action was taken, the commanding or the executive officer was spoken to by the captain or the admiral. I think that's what the investigation is going to find. But I think if people raised this as an issue, especially women and those people who may have been in the closet at the time, came out and raised issues with it and were just dismissed out of hand, then there is a larger issue that needs to be looked into.
I hate to make predictions about where inquiries will lead, but I would bet heavily that you will find, when this is investigated, that there were emails, communications that will radiate out much more significantly, and this did go up to the very top, not only on that vessel, but elsewhere. Too many people simply saw it, and there were complaints, as were alluded to at the very beginning of the video, when he speaks disparagingly of those who raised the complaints. But I want to switch gears for a second. Commander, how does this compare to what General McChrystal said with respect to the top civilian leadership, the president and the vice president, comments for which he was removed not many months ago? Is this a more egregious or a less egregious violation of an officer's obligation in your view?
Oh, I think it's less egregious. I mean, when you have a senior general speaking out against the commander-in-chief and his staff and those underneath him, that's clearly indicative and that could be perceived as challenging the president's authority. In this one, it's just clearly in poor taste and is done against what many accept as social norms and obviously well below the military norms that we should expect for behavior from senior officers.
Jeff, what's your view on this?
It's a tough call. I don't know which is worse, because at one level McChrystal was just sort of talking politics, and that doesn't affect the soldiers in the field. Mm-hmm. But there is a chain of command, and he was offensive, if not actually violating the chain of command. If you are a woman on that ship, you are a lot more directly threatened by that video than anything McChrystal said.
I think what you have also that needs to be considered in the case of General McChrystal, it wasn't that there was a one-time incident and that was it. There were a couple of incidents that led up to the ultimate situation. In the interviews with Rolling Stone, he had been calibrated once. It clearly was not that effective, and it went on. In the case of this individual, this captain, there's a one-time film incident. I think what you need to look at is what has been his attitude and how has he dealt with his crew, both in his role as executive officer and now as commanding officer. I think the Navy's going to go back and they're going to interview his crew. They're going to determine what the command climate is, and they need to determine, has his attitudes affected the combat readiness of that aircraft carrier? And if it has, then that's a whole different ballgame, and he shouldn't remain in command. Well, but if the investigation determines that there was more to it, and that he in fact is looking out for those women, that he understands based upon the circumstances when he made that video that it was inappropriate and wrong, and that he's since adjusted his behavior and how he leads, then I think we need to take that into consideration.
I agree with all that, but it was a series of videos. It wasn't just one.
It was weekly, actually, over a period of time. I'm not sure how long exactly.
Right, although I'm not sure we know if every one of them was as offensive as this one. So I think there are weekly videos. We don't know what the content was.
We've only seen these 20 minutes.
All of this will be delved into down the road. Anyway, Commander Lipold, Jeff Toobin, thank you so much for being with us. Unfortunately, I think this is not the last we will hear of this very issue.